This is the goal, is to say, look, you need to draw a line in the sand. There has to be some line at which this is no longer considered pro-Israel. We will not allow people who are anti-Zionist and anti-Israel to masquerade under a pro-Israel platform.
This is Faith Complex, a dialogue about the entanglement of religion, politics, and art.
Hello, my name is Jacques Berluneblau of Georgetown University, and you're watching Faith Complex. Joining us today is Mr. Michael Goldfarb. Mr. Goldfarb was Deputy Communication Director for the McCain campaign in 2008, and he is online editor of the Weekly Standard. Mr. Goldfarb, welcome to Faith Complex.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, there's this new thing in town that goes by the name of J Street, and if I'm not mistaken, you had a couple of things to say about J Street. So let's ask you, what is J Street? What are they after?
Well, that's the fundamental question, isn't it? Is what is J Street? And there are multiple answers depending on who you ask, including their own supporters. But J Street itself purports to be a pro-peace, pro-Israel organization, and their goal is to sort of fill what they claim is a void, which is they believe that the mainstream constellation of Jewish organizations, particularly AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is not representing and speaking on behalf of the moderate middle mainstream of American Jews.
And do you think there's any validity to that claim?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I think they're not wrong that there is a large number of Jews who feel like AIPAC does not represent their views. That's true, but that is not the moderate middle mainstream. In fact, the group that most fervently supports this group is actually a rather fringe left-wing element. And they are not well represented by AIPAC. AIPAC is an organization that the fundamental tenet of AIPAC's policy is to defer to the Israeli government. They will support the Israeli government policies and try and facilitate a good relationship between Israel and the United States based on those policies.
Okay, now their argument, of course, is simply supporting everything the Israeli government does might not be in the best interests of the Jewish state. Do you think there's any validity to that?
The thing that separates AIPAC from J Street is this is sort of a paternalistic attitude, right? That you know better than the Israelis what's in their own best interest, that you somehow feel compelled to push on them a policy that is in their own best interest, even though they don't realize it. AIPAC doesn't do that.
Earlier, you alluded to some ambiguity in their messaging, that J Street is many things. Do you think that's inadvertent, that they're discovering exactly who they are as they blossom and grow, or do you think there's some duplicity involved and they're not telling the world what they really are?
I've had a chance now to talk to the leadership at J Street, and I don't believe it's duplicity. I think that the head of J Street, Jeremy Ben-Ami, I believe he's a left-wing guy. He's a Democratic operative. He is a partisan, but he is not a guy who is not trying to do what he thinks is best for Israel. He is genuinely pro-Israel. I think everyone at that organization is genuinely pro-Israel. The problem is the policies, if they've endorsed, have attracted people who are not pro-Israel, who are in fact anti-Zionist, and would self-describe as anti-Zionist. So this was the problem we saw at their conference.
What percentage do you think it was? J Street will claim that was just a fringe, and out of a sense of respect for dialogue and discourse, we simply gave them a hearing. Doesn't mean we agree with them. If you were to put a number on it, what percentage of one-state solution-ers and anti-Zionists were at that J Street conference?
I'd say it's somewhere around 10%, but it's a very loud 10%. And I think you can't invite people to your conference who express views that are directly at odds. So you really come up to a point where I think they fear that if they start cutting off certain elements, even on the fringe, that they will lose a lot of their support, that a lot of their support and energy comes from this far left wing. And without that, they're not going to be as powerful an organization, but at the same time, it's tearing the organization apart.
So the 10%, did you get the feeling that maybe in the last couple of weeks they've decided they're going to purge that 10%?
I think that they realized for the first time that they had a very serious problem. I think this was an organization that craved legitimacy, and they have they've sort of skated by under the radar for the last year and a half since they stood up. They had one major problem, which was when they came out against Israel's operations in Gaza.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us, well, we know, but why don't you rehearse for us what their position was on Operation Cast Lead?
They came out and put out a statement that said something along the lines of, while there's nothing right about raining rockets down on southern Israel, there's also nothing right about an operation that collectively punishes Gaza. It was a statement that put Israel and Hamas in the same category, as though they were behaving in the same way, and sort of, we're going to be even-handed.
Equivalence.
It was a pure equivalence.
Right.
What's going on here? And what they failed to understand was, of course, American Jews would rally to Israel in a time of war. In a time of war, American Jews will rally to Israel, and America will rally to Israel. And J Street, for some reason, there's something about the ideology that underpins this organization, this sort of extreme dovishness, that even in a time of war they were unwilling to rally to Israel. And this really was very damaging for them. And it was the one moment in that 18 months where they seemed out of step, really out of step with American mainstream Jews, and that their whole claim is to represent this mainstream, so it caused a problem for
I
them.
would agree with you. I think it was a tactical misstep, and I think the claims they made were just ludicrous. However, I have noticed, and I think you've noticed, and I think writers at the New Republic have noticed, that the group seems to be centering itself.
I think J Street is tacking right, and we saw this as attacks from critics piled up. And as this story gained steam, we saw that J Street tried to tack to the right and sort of put some of this down. And Jeremy Ben-Ami did that by going and giving an interview to Jeffrey Goldberg, who plays a very sort of prominent role in these kind of questions. And what he said was that his organization would never support any cutoff in aid to Israel. He denounced Stephen Walt and Mearsheimer as anti-Semites. He made a bunch of other statements that, and sort of said, I want to be attacked from the left. He sort of put out a call, I want to be attacked from the left, and the left responded with alacrity and attacked him.
Well, to which I say, Mazel Tov to Jeremy Ben-Ami.
I agree.
Can you join me in that? Mazel
I agree,
Tov?
and I talked to Ben-Ami at the conference, and I said, look, this organization described in this interview, that's not an organization that bothers me, that I worry about. And to the extent that, we were out there and we're, making these attacks on J Street, this is the goal. This is the goal, is to say, look, you need to draw a line in the sand. There has to be some line at which this is no longer considered pro-Israel. We will not allow people who are anti-Zionist and anti-Israel to masquerade under a pro-Israel platform and make these kind of statements. Well, look, in the week and a half leading up to the conference, we started going through who the speakers were at this conference and who the sponsors were and the members of Congress. And there started to be this steady drumbeat of people pulling out. And by the end of it, 17 people.
You were beating the bass drum there,
Yes,
Mr. Goldfarb.
I absolutely was.
All right.
I absolutely was. And by the end of it, 17 people had either, I think there were 13 members of Congress who dropped their support for it, and 4 speakers dropped out, 3 cut after they were cut from the program by J Street after we showed videos of them saying really anti-Israel things.
You were showing them the 10%. Let's be honest here. All right, there is that fringe there, and you were showing them, as is your right as a citizen.
They were on the conference program. We decided to look into it, and these people, it turns out, should not have been on the conference program. It was inappropriate.